Hey everyone, thanks so much for coming to College Days 2018. This will be our last panel and event. I know, it went by really quickly. But I have to say personally that I've had like a really lovely time getting to talk with a lot of you, and I've hoped and to sort of feel the energy that you brought to the festival this weekend. And so I just really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules. I know that you know, depending on if it's conveniently spring break or not, that just the time that you took to say like, yes, I really want to be here and I want to see this theater and I want to meet these other people, and that it's really special to us. We really appreciate it. So thanks so much for being here. And this panel sort of came from the idea, so assisting learning by supporting, that oftentimes in your work in school, you're learning to take on those responsibilities and lead the room and lead the process. But actually that when you get out into your sort of first jobs in the field, they're often as assistants, and that is actually a different skill set. And so I've collected a fantastic panel of folks here to talk about that process. So what's going to happen is that I'm going to ask everybody again to introduce themselves and say where you're from, where you studied, what you're doing, what your roles are. And then I have a handful of questions that I'll ask, and then we'll turn it over for Q&A at the end. So as the panel is happening, if you have questions, just sort of put them in your back pocket, okay? Great. Yeah, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Katie Shade. I'm a resident stage manager here. I went to college at Auburn University in Alabama, and then Sarah Wu. Woo! Where are you going? And I did the internship. It was then an internship, is now an apprenticeship here right after graduation, and I have been on and off staff since then.
My name is Jessica Reese, and I studied theater at Davidson College in North Carolina. I am the literary associate here at Actors Theater, and this is my 3rd season on staff full-time.
My name is Rachel Dart. I'm a director. I live in New York. I went to the Tisch School of the Arts at NYU. What else am I supposed to say? Oh yeah, I was a PTC company member in the 14-15 season. I was a directing apprentice.
I'm Les. I'm the artistic director, and I directed education, and I went to Manchester University and have a degree in drama from Manchester. And if I trained anywhere, I trained at the Royal Court Theatre in London.
Great. So my first question for everyone is, what have you gained from assisting someone else in their process, and how has that prepared you for your work?
I'll go. I went to school for theater management, not specifically stage management. We had no real stage manager on staff. We had lighting designers teaching stage management, which was great because they have a different perspective, which helped out when running a tech. But some of the other aspects of the job weren't necessarily taught. And so doing the internship was actually incredibly helpful because you had seasoned stage managers who had been in the business for a range of years and different experiences to glean different styles from. And that was probably one of the most helpful things, is not only like seeing professional stage management done, which there's a lot of like learning by doing, but also different types of stage management, because it varies on the type of person. And something that I found in school versus professional is that school stage management for me was sometimes power-hungry kids would kind of go into it thinking they would have control and get to run stuff. And I'm gonna say, if that's you, you should head on over to directing. They love you there. And once you get professional, you realize you have no, you don't have control. You attempt it, but like control is not a thing. And it's collaboration for real, to be like, you know, saying the tried and true collaborative art form. It really, really is. And seeing that in different rooms over 9 months was just a plunge into the deep end of what this world needs for working day to day.
Yeah, kind of similar to Katie. I think I'm also an alum of the professional training company. I was a literary intern during the 2010-2011 season. And so it's the first thing I did right out of undergrad. And I just really learned how a professional rehearsal room works, how decisions get made, And also, something that was specifically useful to me as an assistant dramaturg was learning the nuts and bolts of script management and how to adapt to different playwrights' working styles. That was super valuable for me, and I use those skills all the time now in my current position. And I also learned a lot about how to be a good audience member, just being in rehearsal all the time and learning about the ebbs and flows of a process as it moves from table work to staging to doing runs to tech to previews, just how to be present for all the parts of the process and all the different things that they ask from you.
I'll go. Yeah, for me, I didn't major in directing. I was a playwriting major, so I came to directing late, at 23 years old. And so like if you're not majoring in the thing that you end up doing, like you're gonna be okay. I just want to say that to all of you. So for me, and I also have not gone to graduate school, nor do I intend to go to graduate school. So for me, not that there's anything wrong with graduate school, I'm sure it's great. But for me, assisting was my directing education. And I learned how to be in the room from watching people who are very different from me navigate all these different kinds of plays, some of which were plays I was very interested in, some of which are plays that I was not very interested in. But getting to have that sort of range of experiences has been just incredibly useful. And like when you assist somebody and they say something smart, write it down and then say it later when you're directing, and everyone will be like, oh my God, that's such a smart thing. And you can be like, I don't even have an MFA. But I just steal things that people say who are more experienced than I am, and then I repurpose them. So yeah, that's just, assisting is it's sort of my education, for sure.
I was at college in Manchester in 1971, so it was really the tail end of the 60s, and it was completely tumultuous. So I didn't really learn anything practical about the theatre in any way. I mean, most of the classes were stopped. I mean, we thought everything was bourgeois, and we wouldn't allow it to be taught us. I mean, I'm not joking. But I made some crazy decision, like lots of people do in the late teens, that I wanted to be a director and I wanted to direct new plays because I was interested in them when I read them. And I wanted to work at one particular theatre in London, the Royal Court Theatre, which was the flagship at that point of new work. And I managed to get a job there as an assistant. And I assisted over 2 years, really, 3 directors. Charles Marovitz, who was an American director living in London, who worked with Peter Brook and was a basket case. Max Stafford Clark, who became my mentor, and Samuel Beckett, very briefly on a show. What I learned was I had no idea really what went on in a rehearsal room. I learned to be alert. I learned that it was work, not that it was fun. And I mean, it can be fun, but that's not the purpose of it. I learned that it was very serious. I really learned that you have to pay attention by watching, which I think on my, well, why am I saying I think? On my first week of rehearsal for this play that Charles Marovitz directed, I lost attention in the room and was doodling on my script, and the stage manager of that show, Bo, came up to me in a break, took the script out of my hands, gave me a clean one, and said, if I ever see you doing that again, I will remove you from the rehearsal room.
Collaboration.
I learned it. So And I mean, I really didn't learn anything really as a college student. I had no systems in place, and it was my learning experience, and what I learned particularly from this guy, Matt Stafford Clark, is in the back of my mind all the time now when I direct, and I think like a lot of people who've been mentored by one person, at some point in your life you have to get their voice out of your head to kind of move forward, because you're just trying to please somebody, which is dangerous. I mean, probably what you're trying to please is your parents somewhere down the line, but your professional thing, you have to let go of it.
I think that's such a good point of like when you're in a room in the professional setting for the first time, you're not just learning from the person that you want that role. Like as an assistant, I'm not just learning from the stage manager, I'm also learning how different directors direct, how they talk to actors. As a stage manager, you're gonna have to take notes for actors at some point, so you need that kind of vocabulary. Lighting designers and sound designers, you need to be able to communicate with them in tech. And I think this goes for directors as well. Like you have to learn how to talk to all these departments in order to get what you want. So you're always learning from everyone in the room, not just the end position that you want to someday be, if that makes sense.
Great, thanks everybody. The next part of this has to do with how you find the space for yourself and for your voice in that room. So there's a lot of conversation about reading the room and paying attention. And so how do you approach learning in each room how to contribute best? So, you know, do you ask directly? Do you feel it out? What are you looking for in order to offer your support?
I guess for me, I default to like silence. When I'm an assistant, I never assume that the person I'm assisting is gonna want or be even helped by my artistic input, right? I mean, we may share an aesthetic, we may not. They may be interested in what I have to say, they may not be. So for me, I always default to not saying anything and sort of like being competent and punctual and like fulfilling my sort of administrative duties, whatever those might be, and sort of staying out of the way. And that's not to say that's like the best way to do it, but that's the way that I've found that I earn trust from a director that I assist. And that eventually there often comes a point where they'll turn to me and be like, what do you think about that? And I think that's because I earned it by being like competent and punctual. And that's always a very exciting moment. I think you have to be ready for it from the beginning of the process. But I don't personally recommend like walking in and being like, I am here to offer you like the seeds of my expertise, because first of all, you might not have any, right? And like, that's totally cool, that's fine. But also like, there's typically not room in a rehearsal process for like your particular ego, right? There's like already a bunch of like egos in that room, and yours is sort of not of interest to anyone. And again, that's fine. So that's something that I've in particular found works well. It's like, again, to earn the trust by sort of like being patient and not saying anything, and then eventually Les will turn to you and be like, does that look weird? And you're like, yeah. And he's like, cool. And you're like, now I contributed.
The thing that I've learned being on the lead dramaturg side of it lately is that delegating tasks and sort of managing an assistant's workflow is work. And it does take time to kind of think through somebody else's process, and especially if you're an assistant who's maybe interning somewhere where this is part of your educational plan, it definitely takes time on my end to think about what are your goals, what is this person's goals for this process, and where are they at in their education, and how can this process be helpful for them in their path. And all of that stuff is work, and it's great work, and I enjoy it. But the thing that I think an assistant can do is make that work easier for me by being really clear and honest about what you're capable of, by being punctual, trustworthy, responsible. You know, it's demonstrating really great follow through on the things that we ask of you. And some people, you know, everybody's a little bit different, right? So I think some people, I have a hard time delegating tasks. I know that about myself, and I try to tell my assistants, like, if you see something that you think you can do, ask me, like, help me help you by being a little bit proactive, but also understanding that, you know, sometimes the right answer is to hang back a little bit. So it's kind of a balancing act, you know, between the directly asking and being very proactive, and also knowing that your role in the room, as Rachel was saying, is to hang back a little bit and observe and kind of find your way. And that balancing act will look a little different for every process, I think, so just be really alert about that would be my advice.
Yeah, I guess as an assistant on a stage management team, so like here we'll have a stage manager, an ASM, or a PA, which does the same tasks as an ASM, they're just not in the union. And then we have apprentices as well. So there's a clear like delineation of duties on each show. And what I have found is early in my career, when I was the first time working with somebody, you have to develop a relationship to begin with. And I think that starts with the hanging back. I think questions that you have, or you know, opinions that you may have, you can share as much as you feel willing, but I would do it privately with that direct superior. To start to find your voice, start to see what actually matters or not, in terms of, you know, sometimes with our tasks, they don't have to be figured out right away. They can be figured out closer to tech, or like once we open even. So I always started like going privately to my stage manager and being like, I noticed this, why are we doing it this way? To kind of figure out what the trajectory of the solution would be. And then as I've developed relationships with stage managers as their assistant, it becomes a more open conversation. I feel more open. If it's the same director, like on Christmas Carol, I do that every year. I know the director. We've worked on many shows together. I feel okay going directly to him. Other rooms I do not as an assistant, because we haven't formed that bond and that kind of thing. So it's develop the relationship. Once it's more stable, more trustworthy, then you can have those open conversations.
I'm just going to add to that.
Yeah.
I think there's like a little theme going on that I think is really challenging when you're first starting out, is that sometimes it feels like you're going backwards, where it's like, actually the thing that I need you to do is make the copies. And it's not because I don't think that your time is valuable, it's because the copies have to be made. And, you know, and so if you're not engaged in those smaller tasks, those administrative things that Rachel was talking about, then it becomes harder to develop that trust in a relationship. That like it's actually those sort of tiny things that show that you are willing to take on whatever task is necessary that then get you to the next place. And I think sometimes that doesn't feel very good. And I talk to my apprentices about that a lot. I'm like, I'm not giving you this because I don't think that you're smart or that it's not worth your time. But it's like there's just certain things that in everything that we do that have to happen, and I have to learn to delegate. Otherwise, these other things don't happen. And I think that that's just something that you want to negotiate and work with. And if you feel like your whole time is being used making copies, then you come to your supervisor and say, you know, why? And then they can give you an answer and say like, and then the next thing will happen, and you know that people care a lot more than it may seem that they do, or are relatively thoughtful about how you participate.
Yeah, and sorry if I may.
Oh, please.
Like as a director, you don't have to assist, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you want to start your own theater company and do that thing, that's awesome. You know, you don't have to assist anybody. And I certainly have directing colleagues who hate assisting and hate doing all those sort of thankless, often literally thankless things. And like, that's okay. You don't have to do it. If you don't like it and you don't want to do it and you're like, I don't want to get coffee, I don't want to take notes, don't do it. That's totally okay too.
So thinking about that, actually, it's a great segue, Rachel. When looking for assisting opportunities, what criteria do you use to determine if the position will be a good fit for you and for your work?
I thought about this question a lot a couple days ago when Jane first emailed us all the questions. So I was an intern here 2010, 2011, and then I moved to Chicago and freelanced for a few years and did just a bunch of weird stuff, and then a job opened up here and I applied for it and got it. And And when I was doing freelance work, I sort of had like, it was like a three-legged stool, and it was, the three legs were, is this gonna be a resume builder? Is it like kind of fancy, or is this an institution I wanna work for, or whatever? So that's like criteria one, and that's not unimportant. Criteria two, is it a project I'm actually really passionate about? A play I love, a playwright whose work I'm really interested in, an artistic relationship that I already have that I'm excited to keep developing. So that's criteria two. Like, do I actually care about this project? Criteria three is, does it pay? Does it pay well? Does it pay anything at all? And for me, when I was thinking about which projects to take, you had to check like 2 of the 3 boxes. It was pretty hard to get all 3, but I often found that just one was, especially the, is it just fancy and I just wanted to do something fancy? Like, life is too short for like bullshit like that, and that was my, even as like a youth who had my whole life ahead of me, I was like, life is too short to be totally miserable doing this thing for this fancy opportunity that like isn't really teaching me anything, and I'm working for someone who's completely insane. But I will say, there may be times when that is actually totally worth it, and that your idea of, but I will say that the thing that changed for me while I was living in Chicago and working is that my ideas of what worth it meant started to change as I got more experience. And so I think just in thinking about criteria for choosing projects, just like always self-evaluating and reflecting on what your needs are and what opportunities are going to be meaningful to you, because that's going to change, and it's probably going to change pretty quickly. So for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, for me, there's like a clear delineation of like when I was just starting, and any job was an opportunity, any experience was an opportunity, because learning what not to do is just as valuable as learning what to do. So yes, you have a little more resilience with your enthusiasm, so you take kind of some opportunities that later on you're like, oh, I can't believe I did that. But at the same time, learning is learning, and the bad experiences can teach you just as much about what you can handle, what you won't tolerate, and where your line is, you know what I mean? So that kind of thing. But then as I've gotten older, I'm now like, no, I'm not gonna do that. Not worth it. In that way of just like, I've done the Wordle part, and it was fine, and I'm glad I did it, but like, I don't have to put myself through that in the same way, because it's not worth it to me now.
And you had learned all that you could from it. Like,
yeah, and then that well is dry. So I think the other thing I look for when I'm assisting, now that I'm stage managing more than I'm assisting, I feel, I like to make sure that if it's a new person, that the work is balanced, that I have clear tasks that they want me to do, that they don't want to micromanage me, that they would give me a kind of automatic trust with my experience level, that would give me tasks on my own, while still catering to like, they are in charge, do you know what I mean? And then, whereas earlier it was just kind of like, I'll do whatever you need, you tell me what you need, I'll do whatever you want, sort of stuff like that. I ask for a little bit more going into it, a little more clarity of what role is what do you like to do, what do you like the assistant to be, is that a good fit for me, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm looking for people who can do things that I don't know how to do at this point, and that's a lot of people. Like, there's a lot of things I don't know how to do. But you know, I've same thing for me. As I've gotten older, I've gotten more selective about who I want to work for. And you know, last season I like assisted on a show at a theater in upstate New York, and I did it for no money, and it was because I wanted to assist that director. And you know, but it was very specific. I was like, you also are like a small woman who does new plays and is very, very good at it, and I want to watch you and understand how, as like a small woman who looks young, you like navigate a room, and how you do in fact do a new play. And so it was worth it to me to like live in Rochester for a month for no money, to have this learning experience. But there are plenty of people who even like, I wouldn't live at home in my own house and assist for no money anymore. So yeah, it is just about sort of like what can you gain from that experience.
So now that you're on the hiring side, as many of you do have assistants or hire apprentices or are part of that process, What are you looking for in an assistant, and what qualities do you think makes that relationship successful?
For directing assistants, somebody who's got a passion for the work that you're doing. So if somebody says, you know, to me, I just want to assist on anything, that's a complete turn-off. People who've done their research on the institution and what the institution does, people who haven't done the research, that's a totes turn off. That drives me nuts. I think that's just lazy, and it's surprising the number of people who do it. Particularly for directors, because so much to do with directing is about listening. I mean, so you're listening to the play in all its facets. You're listening to actors. Sorry, this is a strange thing, but you're listening to the temperature of the room all the time, and people, and somehow in your conversations with directors who want to be assistants very early on, you have to assess, can they listen? And if they can't, it's a disaster. And people who will be alert in the room, you know, and I personally need people that, like Rachel said, I can suddenly turn around and say, that just looks like shit, doesn't it? Because my instincts have gone down, or I don't know where I am in the process. And I need an opinion, and I need an opinion, and this is very tricky, and some people may have it. It may be a gift, or you learn it. It's your capacity to give these opinions according to where you are in the process. And people are like, oh, why aren't they doing this? Which often directors say about actors. And it's like, well, they're not, because basically they're doing the first draft of the thing, and you're looking for results. And this is a process, or a process.
I would say what I look for, if it's specific to a show that I am doing rather than the apprenticeship, but if it's like my assistant on this show, I'm going to pick someone who's complementary to my style, who chills me out, who has a quality that I aspire to have in myself. And if it's if it's like the apprenticeship here, one thing that I look for in the interview is, I guess, like a chill factor, or a tempering of excitement, because while I appreciate enthusiasm, I appreciate eagerness, I think this job requires you to have those things. I think you need to be sensitive to the fact that I am just now meeting you over the phone, and while an interview is a stressful situation, how are you dealing with that stress? If you're really just like so excited to make this opportunity happen, and I'm really, really glad to hear from you, and just like, it's like telling me, like, okay, high strung, can't mask it. First impressions, all of those things kind of go into an interview. So however that manifests into how you chill out before an interview, just keep that in mind. I like to have a cheat sheet of answers in front of me. So like, the questions you always get asked, what are your strengths and your weaknesses? What do you want to see yourself being in 5 years? I have that written down in front of me on my computer, and I go like, oh, let me think about that. Okay, I would like to be living here, doing this, da, da, da. And that calms me down when I'm being interviewed. Because that kind of just high-strungness is not something that I necessarily would like in a rehearsal room assisting me on, because what are you going to do when like the set falls apart and we have to figure out something? Or Topical example, the trap stopped working in the middle of a show, and there's all the furniture in the basement, and needs to come on stage right now. Do it, figure it out. That literally happens more often than not. So that kind of calm energy is something that is a very important quality to have, and if you can have that come through in an interview, it's just going to help me think you're more mature, you're a little more settled in where you are, you're more able to listen because you're not so focused on trying to talk. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's someone I know I don't have to take care of. You know, like there's so many, like I was saying earlier, there's so many things that are going on. I can't manage my assistant. I can't manage their feelings. I don't ask my assistant to manage my feelings. I have managed the feelings of many a director as an assistant, and that is, in fact, I think one of my special skills as an assistant director is I manage feelings effectively. You can tell me if that's true or not. You don't have that many feelings to manage, actually. It's really great.
I have two. Annoyance and more annoyance.
But yeah, so it's like, but so I don't want to manage my assistant's feelings, you know. I want to be able to like delegate tasks to them and then not worry about whether they're going to get accomplished. And yeah, I want them to be a person who like understands what it is to be an assistant and wants to do that thing and isn't just sitting there being like, well, if I were directing this play, it's like, well, maybe one day you will be, but right now you're not. And so when I like ask you for things, I need you to execute them like sort of through my eyes. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's hard to do. But yeah, that's what I hope for.
I will also answer this question. Everybody's giving such great answers. I think the thing I have been thinking about the last couple of minutes is everybody else has been giving such great answers, is that I really can't underestimate the research aspect and kind of knowing what you may be getting yourself into. I think especially for a more long-term commitment, like a season-long apprenticeship or something, I think that enthusiasm about just being here or being at this fancy thing is probably actually not going to be enough to sustain you over the long haul of a process that may have its ups and downs and challenges and things you wish were different. And so having a more well-developed sense of how this opportunity fits into your career path or answers some question that you have that is like a very deep question, I think that will all be to your benefit. Because yeah, I think just like, this is fancy, this is gonna be great, I'll do anything is tough. It's really tough to sustain that over a long process for sure.
Yeah, like if you are gonna be a directing apprentice here, you're gonna assistant direct either Dracula or Christmas Carol. And like if the idea of assisting on either Dracula or Christmas Carol like makes you very upset, then like don't do it. Don't come here.
Tell.
Yeah, and people can tell if you think you're like above that or whatever, like you're not. And also you're gonna learn something. If you let yourself learn something from assisting on one of those shows, you will, and you're gonna also like have a really good time. So yeah, like you can't be mad that you have to assist on Dracula Christmas Carol because you knew that before you got here. So yeah, all this by way of saying I totally echo this idea, like do your homework and know what you're gonna be doing. You did great on Dracula. Thanks, Katie. So did you.
Great. Utter brilliance, which is why we wanted you all here. So we'll take questions now. And so I see 1, 2, and 3. Okay? Down in front.
So this was a recent development for me as an undergrad. I submitted the assistant direct, and the director told me I was too experienced to be an assistant director because I had directed like 10 to 15 shows outside of the department. How do I convince them that like I want to learn more and I'm not? I feel I still need to do stuff and work with other directors. How do I navigate that conversation when you have something like that?
I often get this from older, more experienced directors when I'm like, hey, I'll still assist you, and they're like, oh, stop assisting. I would be like, I would love to stop assisting one day, you know what I mean? But like, that day has not yet arrived, and I am in fact the judge of what I need to be doing right now, you know? So, I mean, you can't convince somebody who doesn't want you to assist them that they should let you assist them. But yeah, I mean, I think that's great that you want to keep assisting and learning more. But that person who tells you that you're like too experienced might not be the right fit for whatever reason, you know?
Maybe ask yourself what about that process is what's interesting to you. If you're like, actually, I really want to work on this thing, which I would think I would get in that room.
Yeah.
Yep.
So a number of you talked about that you started in one thing and now you're in this area, and that's kind of what you're pursuing here. So outside of a college environment, how did you pursue those opportunities if you started acting and now you're directing without having a ton of experience in that? How do you convince people to take a chance on you or have confidence in yourself being like, I should go and try this thing in the professional sphere?
I worked for free a lot. You know, and like the truth is to be an effective assistant director, all you have to be is like a competent, punctual person, you know, honestly. So when I showed up to places and was like, hello, I'm a competent, punctual person with a different theater major and I will work for no money, people were like, that sounds great. So I did that a ton. And then I also, you know, I was a playwriting major, so I had all these playwright friends, and I was like, I'm a director now, and they were like, okay, that seems like it might be true. For me, it was like, I was willing and able, honestly, and that's a huge privilege, right, is to be able to like work for free. And yeah, and also to like reach out to people that you know and be like, hey, I've never done this thing before, but like, why don't we all try it out together in sort of a low stakes environment, and then sort of build credits from there.
I would say there's an agent actually who gave me this piece of advice a long time ago, and so I like to share it because again, it was really smart. Is that, so if you sort of like think about your interests as a line of like different, like a line graph that moves up differently, that you can't, you don't have enough time to move them all forward at the same time. And so you may actually have to say like, no, right now, I'm really interested in acting and I'm gonna really push that line forward, but I'm also interested in writing, and so once I feel really confident in my profession and my role on this line, then I'll come back and I'll pull that other one up too. And that you have time to do that. It takes like a lot of energy and patience and diligence, you know, that to do that. But like for myself, I came here and I worked in the education department, and I have worked and sort of pushed that goal back, and now I'm sort of going back and working on my own writing. But I had to move one line forward first, and get there and get solid. And then once you, like as Rachel said, you have those relationships and connections you've built in time, it is challenging to get people to see you as a different thing. You have to, I will say that the thing that's actually most difficult, at least for me personally, is that you have to go back to being a beginner. So you establish this thing that you feel really confident in, and you feel good about people seeing you're like, yeah, like James does that thing, and then I'll be like, also this, you know, how about this too? And so you have to go back through all those beginner feelings again, and that can be sort of challenging. But you, as I say a lot, being a beginner is a gift, because you can see things that people who are experienced in it don't, because you're looking at it from a new perspective.
I think something else to keep in mind, sorry.
No,
I think something else to keep in mind, especially in this kind of apprenticeship and going through this trajectory that I've had, is you're not only learning the job that you want, you're also learning how to teach it. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that's honestly, like I started out being like, I love theater and I love stage management, I love seeing it all happen, I love being in a play, watching it from the booth, listening to an audience, like you feel really part of it. That's how I started. I now thrive on mentorship, education, getting new people in, seeing how far I've come, and helping them become good stage managers, and just to permeate the field with really good stage managers is like my new kind of joy in this job. So what you start really appreciating will change and shift, and things will get jaded, things will get different. But there's other things going on in theater that you might really appreciate differently, kind of going in with that. So just be open to it.
Over here.
Hi. So I'm a director. Finishing my undergrad, I'm starting to try and build relationships with directors in the area. And sometimes I'll see works and I'm always really tempted to just email the directors and be like, I love that. Like, can I help you? Can I observe anything? But I'm always, afraid of being too annoying or abrasive. So I'm wondering if any of you have any recommendations about cold emails and how to begin to nurture those relationships.
I don't think emailing anybody would be regarded as annoying. I mean, persistently emailing somebody, yes. But no, no, I think that's perfectly acceptable to get in touch with somebody. And I mean, with directors, we're a bit bonkers and we like flattery. I mean, if you see somebody's work and you like it, or you think if you think somebody's work is interesting, then let them know that. And, say things like, I understand you're very, very busy, blah, 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 but if there's any opportunity to meet, I would appreciate it. I mean, I've met several high school kids from here, or people in colleges nearby who've seen work, either my own or other people's at the theatre, and asked to meet, I mean, a bit of advice is like, if anybody opens a door to you, if a crack of a door opens, get yourself through the door. I mean, don't be shy about it. I mean, all of us are in this profession, and some of us here are actually quite shy as people, but some of us. But if take the opportunity. If it's there, just take it. Otherwise, you're going to be like, oh, they wrote back, and I just, I was nervous of going, and it's gone. It's just an opportunity wasted.
Over here.
So when y'all began to develop yourselves professionally, I know you mentioned doing a lot of stuff for free, which is all well and good, but how did you balance your need as humans to eat and having a place to live while you continue to develop your art?
Yeah, so I mean, this is sort of an obvious answer, but I tempt a lot, and at a certain point I was like, oh, the temping really works for me because I don't care about it, and I can drop it any time to go do the thing I really want to do. And so in order to do that, I turned down some more, better paying full-time job opportunities in Chicago that really just weren't what I wanted to be doing. And by then I was paying for my own health insurance, and I kind of figured that out. And so I was making it work, and so I really did. But those were hard decisions to make. So I was like, oh, I could be making a lot more money if I turned this temp gig into a permanent thing. And I was like, but then I wouldn't have the freedom to do the thing I came to Chicago to do in the first place. But the great thing about temping for me in my current job as a literary associate working in a literary office, which may or may not apply to you or to a lot of folks in this room, is that I was able to find day jobs that were still teaching me important skills that I use here. Because a lot of, if you're working on the admin side or the education side or the literary side, there's a lot of admin. I do a lot of data entry. It's kind of cool and great that I did a lot of data entry in Chicago, as awful and boring as it was. But I was able to find temp work that was teaching me skills that I could put to use in my current job. And so that was, so there were some kind of temp gigs or other things that I turned down because I was like, oh, that's not even going to teach me anything. But then there were other things I was able to do that I could at least glean a little bit of something from it. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, but just, I don't know. Super helpful.
I think if you're a contractual career person, which director, stage manager, actor, designers, sometimes shop people, costume shop people, you are entering a field that is not secure. You are entering a field where your job will end, and you are entering a field where you will constantly look for work. So you need to wrap your head around that right now, and you need to be proactive in your brand and who you are and your career. It is up to you to find the opportunities, and it's up to you to gauge how you're feeling about your career and where to go forward. You're not necessarily going to have security, and so if that is something that you do not like, you need to start evaluating that. If you are, you need to figure out what side jobs you can do. Temping is fine. I do catering still, or this year, in my off time. So it's not an indication of your skill or aptitude when you don't do theater to live. It happens, everybody does it, and you have to eat and house yourself. So it's gonna happen, and the more you just take ownership and power of that and make sure it's your decision and you're not being forced to do something, I think you're gonna feel better about it and then be able to do the work you want to do later.
Yeah, and I'll say that I was realizing as we were giving our intros, like all four we ladies were interns here at a certain point, and I will say that like when I interned, during my internship, I held 2 other jobs. And some of it too is that like you are counterbalancing all of those opportunities with cost. Like everything has a cost to it. So what is your return on investment? Like it's gonna be worth it to me to work extra over the summer and not do a summer stock and not do a thing, so that I can then have this opportunity where I'm not gonna have as much time to work. Or I'm gonna agree that I'm gonna be tired. And I think we sort of talk about like the glorification of the starving artist.
Bullshit.
But it's like,
it's such bullshit.
yeah, it is. But it's like I think in all of the things here that we've sort of been talking about is that it's a lot of like, what am I counterbalancing with what is what my passion is or what the opportunity cost is, and how can you work those things out? And in the same way that I was talking about those, back and forwards, it's like, is that job worth it to me? How can I do this? What is a set, like, I know so many people who have like cultivated a totally separate money-making skill set that they can do concurrently with their piece. And you want that to be a thing that, I actually really got into theater education because I could work at summer camp and I could do theater all day, and then I could work on the summer play at night. And that then became the thing that I was really passionate about. So you can sort of be tangential to it. So I think it's about finding those things where you do still feel that your work is being fed and that you are both being emotionally and literally fed, and making choices about what you're doing. Yeah.
It's an active career. You can't just sit back and let it happen or just be stuck in it. In my case anyway, you have to be proactive, you have to be forward, you have to be thinking of the next year of your life and how it's going to be different or what's going to be the same or what's best for you. Because honestly, the other thing I notice in stage management often is you take a break. You take a break. You take a break to have kids. You take a break because you're burned out. You take a break because it was a bad time on the last show and you need to not deal with it. And that's also okay. Theater will always, the thing that Kathy, my dear friend and who I learned a lot from, is always just like, theater will always be there. It will. It will. We'll always need people to do it. It will always be there. Theater's dying. Not true. It will always be there. So you just have to really start being self-reflective and self-aware of like what path you're on and where you're at. Because it's up to you what you want it to be.
That was such a deep question. That was great. I loved hearing from you all about that.
I think that's the other thing too, to be honest, is like we have all struggled with that, including Les. Like everyone who works in the arts is like, how am I going to balance my passion, I think half of the speakers have said like, if you can leave, leave, and we're like, we couldn't leave, and so we had to figure it out. And sometimes that means taking a break, or sometimes that means just renegotiating what you think success is, reconsidering what is meaningful to you about what your work is, and it's a constant state of reevaluation and reassessment, and that can be exhausting, and that's also part of what the work is. which is also a thing that most of our parents don't get.
And unemployment is not shameful, is what I'll say.
Yeah, it's not a failure.
It feels weird saying that even right now, but it's really not shameful. Our business is just temporary in a lot of ways. So it was such a clarifying moment. It was just like, I will be unemployed in my life, and that is not an indication of my skill, worth, or aptitude. Yes, down in front.
Les, you had talked a little bit earlier about the voice and the mentor and like letting that go. When do you all feel like was your time to kind of be like, you know what, I think I've got enough experience now. I don't think I need that voice in my head anymore. I'm my own individual person, and I can, make decisions on the project I'm doing and be confident in what I'm doing. When did you feel like that was, or when did you feel that was, your time to be doing that?
Yeah, it took me forever. It took me forever to get Max's voice out of my head in a negative way, that I would feel that it's so bizarre really. I would feel that somehow the productions were failing him, so and it didn't matter how other people viewed them, that there was something niggling away at the back of my head, and I would think, I didn't do it correctly. And it snapped in my head. I did a Carol Churchill play called A Mouthful of Birds, which is a play that she wrote with David Lenn and is a deconstruction of the Bacchae. And it was a very bad rehearsal experience, and it opened at Birmingham in England, and it had a notorious opening night in which hundreds of people walked out, and people shouted at it. And I somehow, in the second half, where people were booing this one speech, and afterwards I went to the bar and thought, I'm going to see how much I can drink really, really fast. And like lots of people, in the theatre, I can drink. And I got shit-faced and something snapped, probably alcohol, snapped in my head, and I thought, and the show was very strange, and I thought, fuck all of this. I think part of the reason I'm so worried about this is that the show bears no relationship to anything Max would have liked. And I'm worrying about the wrong thing. But that was 10, 12 years down the road. And now, if I'm stuck in a rehearsal, when I can't find my way through something, I will go back to one or two things that I learned from him and think, hang on, if I apply that, that's the positive thing. It's who you want, approval from. I mean, it's just the negative side of this thing.
I think I was itching to be in the role I wanted to be, and so even though I had very concrete examples of like, this is the way you do this thing, the second you're, I think it was the first show I equity stage managed. It was in a Humana play. I was in the room. I was running the room. There's that first day thing where everyone just goes, are you ready? And you're like, guess I am. Okay, great. And you just kind of blaze through, and you have those voices in your head, but you don't necessarily, you question them. You go like, well, why do we do it that way? Okay, that doesn't make sense to me. Let's try it this way. Oh, no, that didn't work. And then you can go back to the way that they taught you. You have another round, but I was sort of ready for it, and then you kind of just hush them up and then see what happens, and then if it's successful or not, if it makes you feel like you're on the right track or not. Because a lot of those examples are helpful starting out, because at least you have a baseline. and then you can start to kind of feel out your own system.
I'm still sort of in the middle, I think, of getting my mentors' voices out of my head. But I think the thing that's helped is as I kept trying to do it, learning that, and spending enough time with them and learning that they too are people who have hopes and dreams and make mistakes. And but that is like such a revelation to me. They're like, oh, this person I think of as like such a freaking genius also has like a bad day at the office, or like has a bad rehearsal practice, you know, and just having those experiences has taught me a lot. And I think I'm like thinking about that a lot right now, though, so it's a really good question.
We have time for one last question. Oh, there you are. I knew it.
I have a sort of specific question from the city I live in. I'm from Minneapolis, and right now the way the sort of theater ecosystem is going is that there's a lot of careers for more established artists, and a lot of beginning artists kind of branch off and start their own theater companies. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or advice for how to foster a sort of space that invites more beginning and intermediate artists to get their feet in the water there.
Specifically in Minneapolis or in general?
Anywhere. I mean, I would just use Minneapolis as an example. I know that's a hard question to answer, but I don't know.
So how to foster new artists
Yeah.
and new careers in the arts?
Yeah.
I mean, I think here we do it really well. Of just, we have 40 people that come in and train for 9 months, and then they go out, and there's a whole community of them in New York and Chicago now, and all over actually. But I think that's just the way theater is set up right now. It's like you intern, you work for no money after interning, and then you develop connections. I mean, this business, as sad as it is to say, it's who you know in a lot of ways. So those experienced people need assistance. It's the reality of it. So until you can do your own work and get to that level, like going out and getting assistantships is the way you kind of meld the two together, I think. I also think there's an opportunity there for like mentorship in a different way. So I think one of the things that Jess said, which is that you also have to remember that those established, experienced people were also new at one point. And it took them a while to get to where they are, and it took a lot of work to do that. So I think remembering that it's a process, it takes a while. And I think specifically the purpose of doing all that work, you know, or like wanting to like go off and create different companies is then to learn more. So to me, actually, one of the real questions that I have is like, how do we give people useful feedback? You know, so you've got a new company and you make a new work, and then your friends come and they say, great job, and then you don't, like, you learned what you learned in your process, but like, critics aren't necessarily, critics have a slightly different job, right? Like, they're trying to help audiences figure out whether or not the show matches their taste, as opposed to like, as an artist to artist, here are the things that I saw you working on doing, here's where I think you succeeded and here's where I think you could grow, is a different sort of relationship. So I think finding ways as young artists to be able to have those really honest conversations with each other about the work that's being made on different levels, and saying like, I see that your taste is better than your execution, or I see that you're reaching for something that you actually don't have the money to produce at the level that you're trying to do, could be a way to help support those ecosystems. And honestly, like, I'm pretty jealous of Minneapolis's theater community, because it actually does seem like there's, at least from the outside, it feels like there's a lot of resource there for companies in terms of finances. And then I think it's also for all of us to learn where funding comes from. You know, and how you fundraise and how you find donors and how you find grant opportunities, that's often like, that next step is really the administrative part of it. It's like, we've all got really great artistic ideas, but like, most people don't want to be the person who does the paperwork. Most people, you know, or sign the contracts or find the venues or like all of that side of things, so that if we can balance out being those resources to each other. I don't know, those are just straight up my opinions.
Yeah, I think help each other. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's such an idea of like scary scarcity in this field, and it's like there's actually room for so many of us. There's room for all of us, really. And so instead of sort of like getting into like a defensive crouch and like not sharing because we're scared. Like if you behave, well, let me put it a different way. When I behave as though we are like in a place of abundance, I feel better. You know, when I'm like, oh, like you're a younger director than me, you're sort of coming up behind me, like, let me help you. Like, I did that program, do you want to talk about it? Let's talk about it. You know, not because I'm like, oh, well, you're a younger director, you're coming up behind me, and like, you're gonna take the opportunity, like, relax. You know, like, again, if you can behave as though there are unlimited resources, and thus you can like help other people and collaborate with them instead of like grasping at the things so tightly that you already have, like, I think you will feel better, you know? It's helped me a lot to try to come from that place of being like, let's share our resources, let's share our knowledge, like, we're all trying to do this together, right?
Is there time for me to say one more thing?
Yes, please.
Oh, great, okay. Okay, so the thing that so Chicago, where I like kind of became a person, also has a very thriving theater community. And, but something that I thought about a lot while I was living there is that it felt like there was really only one model for like how to create a theater company or what was successful. And a lot of people are kind of living and working in the shadow of Steppenwolf and the ensemble model. But there's so many ways to make work outside the world of, well, I need to set up a 501c3 and recruit a board and do, you know, and luckily now there are things like fiscal sponsorship through Fracture Atlas. Like there are, I think more and more people in the field are trying to help us all make work outside of the sort of regional nonprofit theater model, and that is like only good for the community, I think. So I think the more we can help each other to think beyond like, oh, I need to set up a formal company in order to do this thing. It's like, or you could just do the thing and raise money how you raise money and, you know, worry about the paperwork later, you know. And yeah, I felt like a lot of companies in Chicago like rushed to incorporate, and I was like, why? You just need to like make a couple plays. Yeah. And the sort of formality and the administration was like a barrier to actually doing the work, which I often found really frustrating.
That's a good perspective too. Just like regional theater as we know it is very young in terms of companies and structures and what it is to be a business of theater. And I mean, this theater, John Jory was here, and then we've had Mark Master and then Les. So like we are just now into like the second phase of regional theater in terms of like this kind of place, which has lasted pretty long. So new ideas are maybe something we don't think about enough, but we are now at a point where I feel like there's a lot of new ideas coming in about how to run a business of theater, how to change it up, how to do all of that. And that's where new young ideas can really help older established places in a great way. Great. Thank you all. Thanks to our panel.